Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to be going into further in detail to the Volrath legend. Now we have the dungeon part of the castle, although it's still mostly dialogue. And that was a bit of a challenge, because a lot of times, you get information in dungeons through, doing things, through looking at puzzles, trying things, shit like that. And in this case, it's all got to be conveyed through dialogue. And it's not like and not like a fairy flying in being like, this is what you need to do. The idea is that you're, looking back on the conversations that Zeno had, and getting just enough clues to solve the puzzles, but it's got to be, subtle. It's not supposed to be like right in your face, like, go and talk to somebody and they're like, hey, be sure you look under the bed later, right? Because that's stupid. So you sort of have to try and get the solution organically. And there's 3 sections here. Synchronization area A, B, and C. And, the different parts of the castle. And they're also different moments in time. I mean, not necessarily, that far apart. But, maybe days apart, something like that. And so what's fun about that is that we could use the NPCs multiple times. So, you could see, you talk to one person, then you see them again, and they say something kind of similar. And you get a sense of your personality. Like, this crazy lady walks around in a horn helmet and thinks she's a bull. And sometimes, sometimes there's a sequence, and the dialogue's meant to be read in a certain order, but you're not necessarily going to get it in that order. So you sort of have to put it together. And I think that's kind of fun. So this was, the NPCs in this place were a bit more in-depth than, your average town. We named them all. Came up with gimmicks. Sorry. Pneumonia just won't let go. It's mostly gone, but I still cough periodically. There's a bull again saying that she has to restrain herself because his headband is red. So, so this is, you just wander around, you take in all the information, and then figure out how to proceed. And we actually haven't gotten to the central objective yet, which is to find a way down to, lower ground, basically. Because right now, the castle's, pretty high altitude area, but Solik and Rana have gone down to the shores. And so Stoic doesn't really know which way they took. So he has to go the way he knows, which he remembers vaguely that there was something in this castle, that would have the answer. Now what you saw there with Volrath sort of, barely visible, is that in each of these areas, you have to fill that synchronization bar up. And once it does, you can have an additional conversation somewhere in the area, and it gives you, some really important information. You see that blonde elf there is saying that something's up with that fireplace. People have been messing with it. So here's the giant mess hall, even though, it's kind of shows, but it's also because we don't have every seat filled, it kind of demonstrates how it's not a huge army. and so that's I think that's kind of interesting dynamic. Plus, who wants to make that many NPCs? We didn't. So a lot of these are kind of cute. It's some humor here. Oh, that NPC referenced something interesting. I was going to tell like the story of this dungeon. You see, this dungeon, what's in the final game, what you're seeing now, is really only about half of what was planned. So you remember in Arc 1 you had the combination of the mausoleum, and then you go up into the church, and it's a whole other thing to do, and that was just sort of fun to have that, that expansive, I guess, experience. So originally we wanted something like that for this. So we would have this castle here, which is mostly just exploring and talking and such, and then you would go down under the castle and there would be a whole thing there. But, I've talked about how I had a bit of a hard time while we were making this arc, how it kind of pushed some buttons, that it, kind of brought back some things I hadn't thought about in a while. And, by the way, that's just playing these NPCs. That's the character Dark Sovereign from the game Outlaw City. And there's a bunch of NPCs in this area that reference a lot of RPG Maker games that we were sort of playing at the time, stuff our friends were making. Oh, and that NPC who talks about his loud burp, that's another joke. Yeah, so these are all the little in-jokes. And the thing about the burping was my little brother, Finley fan, did that once. We were in Yosemite National Park out in California back, it's my first time I went out there, so I was like maybe 12, 13, I can't remember. So he was like 6, and they had this really nice lodge in Yosemite. We didn't stay in the park, but there's like it's a really nice old building there, and it's got a huge dining hall, kind of like this actually, with high ceilings and everything. And sure enough, my brother burped, and it just echoed all over the place. And of course, my parents were embarrassed, and I just was like rolling on the floor laughing, practically. So that's what that gag is about. But back to this dungeon. At the time we were making this particular arc, Mark Arping had gotten his first, significant job in the game industry, which was he was down in coastal Connecticut, about 40 minutes from where I live, and there's this company, and it was mostly like, I think it was something like games and casinos, I mean, not necessarily like old style slot machines, but more like, kind of modern chance games and stuff. I think that's what it was. I may be mistaken, but he was doing that stuff. And if you've heard stories about the game industry, you know that like they really like work people hard. Like, it's not healthy at all. They have what they call crunch time, which is supposed to be like everybody works a shitload of hours for a short time so they can finish something. But more often than not, fucking crunch time goes on for like months, and it just completely like wrecks people, because you're not supposed to be working like that. It's not healthy for anybody. But got to get everything done for our fucking quarterly earnings or some shit. But he was working like stupid hours, and he would come home and he was tired, and he just really had a hard time of working on this. In this case, I mean, he designed this whole castle and came up with a general idea for what you do, but I mean, I did the NPCs, I wrote all this stuff. It was, I did more than I usually do for the dungeons. And then, of course, we have the beach dungeon later, which we can talk about that when we get to it. But what I will say about it now is that You see, you were going to go down into the tunnels after you finish this part, and there was part of that was like there were these big areas that were sort of collapsed, big holes in the ground, and you had to jump on these little like stone pillars that were left to make your way across. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because we basically moved that element into the beach dungeon where you're jumping on where you're jumping on stuff there. And actually, there's a brief demonstration of it after this dungeon. So that was one element of it that we salvaged. There was also a really neat puzzle that I thought was awesome, where it was like you had these blocks in the center of a big room, and it was, you had a big line of them vertically, and then you had these four, there were two on either side of the vertical line, and you could move those, you could push those around. And they would, if you push them to a certain place, it would, would start to resemble a sword. You'd have the horizontal line of blocks was a hilt, and then you had the vertical part, which was a blade. And wherever the blade was pointing, there'd be like an open door or something like that. So you could move the blocks to the other end of the vertical line, and then the sword's pointing the other way, and then the door on the other side would open. And there was also like another thing you could do, because all this was on like a little circular plate, so you could rotate the plate by like 90 degrees, and then you'd have the sword pointing to the left or pointing to the right, and then you could open those doors. And I just thought that was like really cool. Like I tested it out when he had it up there, and I was super psyched for it. And I was pretty bummed when that whole, that whole half of the dungeon just wasn't going to get used. And like I said, we salvaged the pillar jumping, but not that, because you couldn't really do a puzzle like that, at the beach. And I kept saying, we do, like, there'd be more dungeons after this, and I'd be like, oh, dude, we should do that sword puzzle. Remember that one we were going to do for Mark V? We should bring that back. That was really cool. And it didn't really seem like he wanted to do it. I mean, I don't know if I think just the moment had passed. He might have associated that with, like, a difficult time, in his life. Because, he eventually left that job. He couldn't fucking take it anymore. Like, he took like one sick day because he was like, and then when he got back, they fucking chewed him a new one. And it's just like, come on, you guys. Like, I don't understand. Like, who the fuck is like, people really expect you to be that loyal to a company that you're gonna like work yourself to death for what? What? Wasn't getting paid that great, I mean, a lot of these, like, entry-level jobs in the game industry, you don't get paid very well, and they expect you to work yourself fucking sick. Sorry, I'm getting mad. It made me mad at the time, too, and it still does. But the point is, he eventually left that job. He got a different job that was better, although, lasted a few years, but, things happen, and that's his story to tell if he wants to tell it. But, but I think, that sword puzzle, he sort of came to associate with a difficult time, and so he didn't feel great about like revisiting it. But I told him, man, I'm going to steal this. I'm going to steal this. I'm going to put it in a dungeon in some other game, because it's just sad that like people didn't get to play around with it, because it was really fun. So yeah, you might see something like that in Legacy. Who knows? Assuming I ever get that done. So now, I suppose I should talk a little bit about what we're doing now. Basically, the gist of the dungeon, and I'm going through it kind of quick because I know what you gotta do. There's a secret exit in the castle that's in the fireplace. But Volrath had it designed. He had, there's a few, like, mages and sort of, craftsmen that he had in the army that he was talking to that designed it so that you could only see the keyhole if the fire was on. So, in other words, like, but if the fire's on, you try to unlock it, you're going to get burned. Now, Volrath was a fire mage, so no problem, But there was an artifact, and I think, if you read that conversation with Volrath a few minutes ago, he says that, this alchemist guy gave him a gift that was an orb that, protected you from fire if you held it. And so Volrath got that gift and was like, well, I already know fire magic, so I can't really do much with this, so, should find somebody else who could have it. And that's what we need to get through, because nobody in this group is a fire mage, and so they can't, they can't do that. So the entrance to that church area where we just were has stumped a few players, because, the path doesn't lead directly to it, because it's been, eroded. So there were a lot of people who would come on the internet and be like, how do I find, the last part of Area C? I've been everywhere. And we'd have to explain that. They're like, oh, how was I supposed to know that? And I'm like, yeah. Sometimes people figured it out, sometimes they didn't, but, there's nothing about the building necessarily that makes it suggest that there's a door in that spot, so I think that's the hard thing. You just have to, kind of look at, the part of the path that's still there, and then kind of, determine it from there. So, probably should have had, a little overhang or something, so people know that there's something about that spot. But anyway, so that was a dungeon that never was. And like I said, a lot of it was preserved for the beach dungeon in terms of the jumping stuff. But I really wanted that sword, man. I wanted him to do it for the altar dungeon in Arc 7. You didn't want to do it. I wanted him to do it for the last dungeon, which has a million other puzzles, and you didn't want to do it there. And I was like, all right, I guess not doing it. But I don't think he was as impressed by it as I was. And I guess it's kind of always been like that, with me and him, because, I can't, it doesn't come as naturally to me to, program these things or plan these things out. So I would see something he made, and I'm like, holy shit, this is really cool. And he'd be like, yeah, it's all right. Yeah, he's got high standards for himself, so. At least maybe I'll use it someday. I'd like to. Here, I believe, is the fireplace key. Are we done here? Did we do everything? I don't remember. I should have paid paying more attention instead of just talking. But I figured that's the part that, you guys would want to hear about, because it's not like, no need to paraphrase everything everybody's saying, because you guys have played this, most of you anyway. So yeah, okay, I'm missing something. I think I know. Now the music here is another Epica song. There's that theme that we have a couple different versions of for Volrath. But it goes through a very, it's very cinematic. It's almost got a little narrative to it. It's pretty immersive most of the time, but it'll randomly get loud. And depending on, you've probably heard it a couple times already. I record this stuff with the sound off, so it doesn't get into the mic. But, when you guys watch it, the sound is there. But, so depending on where you are, when that big loud part comes, it can be pretty funny. There's a scene coming up here where this goblin, scolds this guy. I'm probably not going to get it. I think it's on the other end of the castle. And so when Mark and I first tested it, we got to that conversation, and, the goblin stepped out and, yelled at the guy, and it was, right when that big, loud part of the song came in. It was so fucking funny. We laughed like crazy. So, that was good. And this elf is called Negative Nancy. Yeah, that's, because she's, it's kind of a variation on Debbie Downer, just always kind of looking on the bad side of things. And people like that get a bad rap, but can't really help it. And sometimes, it's not like we live in a perfect world. There's a lot of shit you can think of. So that guy, you can't quite talk to you until I get to this other bit here. Let's see, is this? Yeah, so this is it. This is the room with at one point that goblin steps forward and yells, and that was what I was talking about. But now the guy that you have to talk to is a character from pretty early versions of the Volrath story. His name is Drick, and he's kind of Volrath's right-hand man. You know, somebody who was with him, somebody who, like, was in the knighthood with him and left, like, shortly after he did. And, you know, they were close, and he was very loyal. And actually, the dragon in Clean Slate, I believe, is also named Drake. I think I may be wrong about that, but you know, that's so I kind of brought that back. Kind of hard to explain that in the in the world, though, because why would you name, you know, why would a dragon name the child after like some dude in a knighthood they probably never heard of? But this is the last conversation we need to have, and then we'll be ready to move on. Time passes kind of quick. I guess that's got like a more meaningful. I meant just now, but I mean it's kind of the theme of this, and you know, just the contrast between you know, the sort of pristine version of the castle where it's just been built, and then the destroyed one with all the cracks and the piles of rubble. It's a powerful effect. And like I said before, like Euphony, who, you know, our friend and RPG maker who passed away a couple months ago, I was talking about him a little bit before. This is a lot of his work, this tile set, and we're really grateful. Okay, so yeah, this is the end. So you gotta open that up, and then you gotta light the fire. But you can't turn the key unless you're holding that that orb. There we go. Let me get back at the top. That's a little awkward. And so this normally would have been the part where you got to the second dungeon, but since that got cut out, it just became a little ladder. Now we're down to the beach. And it's sort of a pretty leisurely walk till we find Solik and Rana. And Mark's good with this. Mark made this stuff, and he makes his maps generally more expansive than I do. You know, I'm kind of like pretty concise about like the areas, but he sort of makes them a bit. He makes outdoor maps that look a bit more like real nature, I think. I mean, not that, you know, it's still not like 1-to-1 ratio or anything, you know, right? Because I've made jokes about like, you know, because an RPG maker, you sometimes will get people, you know, shitting on you for too much empty space on your map. You know, you gotta have like objects everywhere and stuff. But like, I go outside in my backyard and I'm just like, man, this is not very well mapped. I mean, look at all this, just grass tiles all over the place. It's one of those, you know, you play too much RPG Maker conversations. You know, you play too much RPG Maker when you start, you know, thinking of the real world in terms of like whether it's a map. And what's going on with? What did that dude do to Laurel? Is she dead, or is she just like gone for a few turns? Because it says normal, but I don't know. I don't remember these fights that well. But yeah, that's the second time I tried. I haven't done anything, so I guess she's just gone for a little bit. Climbing out of the sinkhole or something. No, there she is. Hi, Laura. But anyway, like I was saying, his outdoor maps tend to be larger scale, which was good for this particular area because, you know, it's meant to be very, you know, rugged and wild. You know, it hasn't been civilized, or whatever civilization was there, you know, was taken out with the Rain of Fire, which we'll start learning about pretty soon. You know, that we're almost at that part. I'm excited about that stuff. You know, because it's just it connects to a lot of. You know, it connects to a lot of like my older work still. I mean, we were talking about the Volrath flashback and that, but that stuff does too. And so I'm looking forward to talking about that. But, you know, I'm not going to jump the gun. Let's see, what do I want to do here? I think we'll go with a double water rifle, because these enemies are all, like, water-based, and so flamethrower is not going to be very helpful. And this actually, although we're getting in fights and stuff, it's not really considered the dungeon proper. So I don't really want to do too many fights, because there'll be, God knows, there'll be plenty of time for that when we get there. But this is our first exposure. Oh wait, let me see if we go here first. Yeah, this is funny. So Stoics said they weren't going to do it, but then they realized that there's a red chest. Are you slow? That's a red chest. So, it's like keeping track of the colors of the chest. That's pretty funny. So Shroud says he's got a little bit of a new trick here. And so this is the mechanic that we were going to use in the caves below the castle and wound up using on the beach, which will be introduced now, which is you put your little shadow over there, or projection, whatever you want to call it, and then you can whoop, and jump where it is. And, you know, it gets a little more complicated. You know, you have wind and stuff eventually coming into play, and you got to, you know, keep that in mind. But in general, it's pretty much one mechanic for that whole dungeon, which I know is like his, you know, Mark thinks that's generally like a good approach to a dungeon, to have like something really consistent. Whereas his older stuff is like much more, you know, I just slow it down and make it a little bit easier on myself. There's no consequence as far as I can tell. Whereas I think people would prefer like the variety of puzzles. He got really fixed on like, you know, everything's got to be very organic from the environment, and should be like building on you know, just one or two mechanics rather than just random stuff everywhere. So, you know, that's I mean, he's good enough at this that, you know, he can make it work either way. Okay, so I think I want to get to Stoic's cave. I want to get to Solic's cave before we stop. That's a good place to end on. Where is it? See, that's what I'm telling you. This is such a big area. It's like, where do you even... I guess it's this way. Yeah, a lot of fights, too. I'm just not feeling it right now, you know? I want to wait till the real dungeon. There we go. Alright, so I guess we will stop there. See you next time. Peace.